And you cannot lead if you can't drive those changes. Doesn't matter how right you are. I was worried that people would expect more of me than I could provide, and I was actually very concerned about my reputation. I was focused on myself, even as I was beating myself up. There has to be a destination or you're not leading. It needs to be bigger than the day-to-day work, the everyday checklist, the showing up and going to meetings and going home. The unfortunate reality is that most leaders are untrained. If you're one of those people that just says, I never want to get involved in politics, then don't become a leader. What's the difference between having a fancy title and really leading? How do you know what to focus on when you're leading your team of game developers? Today, I'm going to be talking about leading well in game development. I want you to walk away with values that will guide you and practical steps to get you moving in the right direction, no matter where you are on your leadership journey. Let's get to it. What does it look like to become a leader? That's what I want to talk about today. I don't just mean, to have a title, to have a role, to have like my title says I'm a director or a VP or a manager or something. How do you actually lead? There are a lot of different types of leaders in game development. Craft and discipline leads are some. They're your producers that take all sorts of shapes, product-oriented people, process-oriented people, live ops-oriented people, operational HR. There's senior folks, the CXOs and VPs and directors. You've got project leaders. Sometimes someone will be taking point on a particular asset or a particular feature, set tech leads. There's so many different leaders, people who fit that title in game development. And the unfortunate reality is that most leaders are untrained. Most leaders in game development have not received any training in being a good leader. They've figured it out as they've gone. This isn't just true in game development. This is true in many, many industries. I think my experience in the military was a bit strange because I was formally trained on leadership. But for the most part, I never received much more of that. And I was at a company that actually focused on leadership quite a bit. There were a lot of trainings I did receive, facilitation, negotiation, different process stuff. I think I did take one course that was actually about leaderships, more specifically in software. But broadly, you don't see a ton of it. And I was that was an exceptional company, and I was kind of strange that I got to do all those things. Many people just are entirely untrained. And this leads to confusion and problems around leadership. One of the biggest ones I see is the confusion of management with leadership. People think that if they're managing things, that's what leadership is. So when they're put in charge of stuff, it means they're supposed to manage it. They're supposed to, take care of the system or the process. That's their job. And this is incorrect. It takes you away from doing what you should be doing as a leader. Another one is the obsession around individual output. When leaders are untrained, they think that everything is about their own busyness, their own just doing more and more and more and more, or the people that they're leading just doing more and more and more, trying to make sure everybody's got their butt in a seat all day, doing lots of work, making sure stuff is happening, assets are being created. My job is to make sure my people are working hard. And related to that, you see leadership often conflated with this idea of like sub-optimizing the team or the org, an incorrect focus on finding something to improve and going and improving it without thinking about how that relates to the broader system. And often you improve the wrong things when you do this, but it's just this grab bag of like, well, I'll fix this and I'll change this and I'll improve that and I'll do this. And it's very misdirected, and you don't actually make the organization much better. In weird cases, you can actually make it worse. Another thing I see a lot from leaders, doing many random, slightly helpful things. There's this view of leadership sometimes that is, I'm here to support the team, and so whatever the team asks me to do, that's what I do. Whatever the team requests and any random task that I see is needing to get done, I'll just go do that. And similar to that sub-optimization, these people are often very busy. They're doing many things, but they're not moving the needle. I don't think they're leading. I think they're just doing a bunch of work no one else wants to do. Last couple, related to confusion and problems I see because leadership is largely untrained. You get a lot of false urgency and rushing decisions. When people aren't trained in leadership well, there can be this pressure to make decisions and to be confident and assertive and decisive in the moment, even when that's not the right thing to do. And I see this a lot. with less experienced leaders. It's not because they're trying to be jerks. It's because they don't actually know how to do anything else. Like that's what they think being a leader is the person who decisively makes decisions. And finally, you have overconfidence. And the idea of like, I always have an answer. Those go hand in hand. The false urgency, rushing decisions, overconfidence, always having an answer. All of these are just this idea of like, that's what a leader is, right? So let's talk about what I think a leader is. I define leadership as influencing others towards a goal. I'll just say that again. Leadership is influencing others towards a goal. There are 3 parts of that. And I'm going to put them in the order I think is appropriate. The most important part of that is the goal. After that, you have this idea of influencing. And lastly, you have the idea of others. Doesn't mean that others are last. Let's be clear. But most important, I think, is the goal. So I'm going to go through what these are, how we get lost in all of them, and what we can do about it to make sure that we continue to lead well in game development. Starting off with that goal, towards the goal, knowing the destination. So leaders move towards something. There has to be a destination or you're not leading. And whatever that something is, it needs to be bigger than the day-to-day work, the everyday checklist, the showing up and going to meetings and going home. It can almost replace the goals that you should have and be focusing on. And especially as a leader, your job is to not just bring yourself, but everybody towards something kind of bigger than any one person that you're all trying to achieve together. And to make this more complicated, there isn't usually just one goal. Leaders have to think about cultural goals. Who do we want to be? Like, who are we today? Where do we want to be? Who do we want to be in the future? How do we go from one to the other? What's the product goal? Like, what is the thing that's going to resonate with players? What are we building? Why are we building it? Leaders need to know that. What's the process goal? How do we want to work together? What looks good there? That can relate to culture, but that can also just be what tools are we using and do they work well and are they helping us get where we're trying to go? And leaders take all these different goals, and there's more than just those 3, but I'll give those 3 as an example. Leaders hold all the goals together. So they take the cultural goal, the process goal, the product goals, the operational goals, whatever it might be, and they bind all those together and they hold them all in tension, recognizing that there's this Venn diagram of different goals, and I'm trying to help us reach the right goals at the right time with this group of people. Unfortunately, we often lose those goals, or they never existed. Maybe they weren't maintained. And so you may be in an organization where you don't actually know what the goals are. No one's informing you of that. And the goals do become something more local of maybe, your team is just, we're just going to get the stuff done that's on the roadmap for us to do, I guess. And that's a team version of, I'm just going to come in, go to my meetings, check off my to-do list items, pick up new to-do list items, and come back tomorrow and do the same thing. All of these things aren't wrong, but they should be in service to some greater meaning, goal, vision, objective that you're trying to achieve together, and the leader is the one that's holding that. When that gets lost, everything's just day-to-day stuff. We aren't going towards anything when that happens. We're just doing a lot of work, and our focus becomes all about the process and building stuff, and not about why we have a process and why we build stuff. I want to talk about the wrong goal when I saw this, actually an example of when I saw this happen. So there was a team that was working in the broad space of player behavior. They were trying to reduce toxicity in an online PvP game. And they'd done this for a long time. They'd been really successful at it. And they had a really positive impact on toxicity. They brought it down in the player base. It was considered a really, really, really highly effective team. And they were. Well, they'd worked a very long time on a particular feature, and it was a big game-changing feature. It would have a high player impact. Their intention was to, again, create a healthier environment for players to play in. So they pushed this major change, and it made the player behavior metrics go in the right way. Toxicity seemed to go down. That was really good. But it also seemed to have this other effect where players kind of got annoyed at the changes it had caused to their game flow, to how they got into game and like how they related to their teammates and these sorts of things. It made a lot of players actually start questioning whether they wanted to keep playing the game. Some left, and they were telling us they didn't like this. But when that happened, the team was looking at the objectives, the metrics that they had, and they were saying like, but look, the toxicity went down. This must be good. This took a long time to unwind. And I think what happened is that team, and broadly the whole studio, had basically substituted the reduction of toxicity for game health. So the game was healthy if toxicity was going down. And so as long as toxicity was going down, game equals healthy. This is not true. And I can give an extreme example of why it's not true. The easiest way for me to reduce toxicity is to turn all the servers off. There you go. Players aren't yelling at each other. They might be yelling at us, but they're not yelling at each other anymore because they can't. Toxicity is now 0. Is this a healthy game? No. Toxicity is important, and you don't want massive toxicity in a PvP game. It drives people away, but it is not equal to game health. Now, this story does have a happy ending. The studio figured this out. They actually reverted the change, and they brought a lot of players back. But it took a while to unwind, and I think it's because they had the wrong goal. The goal of game health had gotten simplified or twisted into just being this one thing of how do we measure toxicity. And it was a much more complicated thing that they were trying to see. And the leaders around the space had lost that goal as well. And they'd also made this substitution and weren't able to keep us out of this problem that happened. Let's say you're in a situation where the goal has been lost, never existed, or hasn't been maintained. What do you need to do about that? The first thing I would say, you need to go find it. It's time to become a detective, or a historian or a journalist, whatever you want to say, and you need to run down what that goal is. In all the cases, going and talking to people, senior people around you, start asking like, what do you think the goal is? What are we trying to do? Why does what we're doing matter? And, some people, if you just do this constantly all the time, maybe people will get annoyed, but you pick specific strategic times to do this, and especially as you're relating to stakeholders or senior leaders, talking to them about this should be their wheelhouse. And you might discover that they do have a goal and you just don't know what it is. And that's great. And now you can start taking that goal and bringing it down to your team. That's part of a leader's job, is to connect other people to the goal. Right? You influence others towards the goal. You may discover that the goal never existed or has been totally lost or malformed, like twisted around, and so it doesn't make sense anymore. This is really cool because you get to start proposing what it should be. And the great thing about this is as soon as you propose what the goal is, everybody's going to come out of the woodwork to argue with you. That's fantastic. Have those discussions, have those healthy conflicts, and actually figure out what the studio or your team or the organization you're in actually thinks the goal is. As you do that, you will coalesce around like, well, I think now this is the goal. And again, now we can all start moving towards that thing. And once you've reached that point where either you've been told what the goal is and accepted that, or you've had to come up with one, generate one, and then had it beaten up and come up with something, and you've come out with like, okay, I think this is the goal for, again, whatever your space is, whatever your org looks like. Once you've found that, you make sure it doesn't get lost again. Okay, so this is all step one. You recover that goal, then you make sure it doesn't get lost, you hold it, you update it, you share it out, you make sure your team is moving towards it. Second part of recovering the goal, I mentioned earlier that there's different goals, right? So again, first we find the goal, and often when I'm talking about that, I mean the product goal. How are we trying to serve the audience? What's the impact we're trying to have? I also think it's important for leaders to have a good understanding of what healthy culture and what healthy process will look like. And I rarely see that in orgs. If you have leaders with a strong grasp of what good looks like for culture and process, they will always have a target to aim for. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what the right thing is here, but for culture, I want you to think about what behaviors you want to see from the team. What does collaboration look like if it's going well? What does focus time look like? How does feedback occur? And about what do we give feedback? What happens when conflict pops up? Who is listened to and who is not? In all of these areas, you want to have a target to shoot for and take your team to. As you're doing that, you're going to discover that the org you're in, the team you're leading, they're not perfect at this right now. That's okay. That's perfectly normal. That's why you're there. You're helping take them towards the goal, the cultural goals that exist. For process, it's the same thing. In an ideal world, the process and the work systems are there to support the team as they move towards the product goals, as they move towards making the game you want to make. The process itself is always overhead, but you want to know the value you are trying to get out of it. You need to know that. Maybe you want to create the right conversations or help the team pick what's most important to do or prevent anyone from running down a bunch of random rabbit holes and wasting a ton of time. You want the process to be as little as possible to meet the goals that your organization, your team, the game has. Again, just like culture, you're probably not in a perfect spot here right now. That's okay. That's why you're there. You're helping make this better. But you need to think about that. You need to understand what's the cultural goal, what's the process goal you have. Once you know what you want to see, you can encourage the good and discourage the bad. That's a core thing that leaders do. Third thing I would do. So first, we found the product goal. Second, we understood what good looks like for process and culture. Now, practice humility. Third thing is practice humility. Humility will get in the way of you holding the goal and sharing it with others. And it's weird how I think this happens, but I've seen it a lot. Ego gets in the way. Ego makes people attached to goals that aren't good, and it tells people that they've already done enough. They've done a good enough job of communicating the goal that they shouldn't have to do anymore. No, I did enough. And all of that's you thinking, well, no, I'm so great as a leader. Look, everybody should know what's going on. I've told them, why aren't they listening? It's their fault. Wrong. If you told everybody the goal and they forgot, that's your fault. You need to tell them again, and you need to find different ways to tell them. Did you hold fast to an outdated goal that made no sense? That's also your fault. You need to acknowledge that. You need to admit it. Recognize and admit the failure to the organization, and then be able to move on. Humility is going to help with all of this, because your ego is going to want to get in the way of that. And I love this quote by C.S. Lewis. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. Humility is not self-deprecation. It's not beating yourself up or some sort of, I'm no good at anything or anything like that. No, it's just not worrying about yourself. And that's really important as you do this. The focus, the purpose is the goal and helping the team reach it. Things like humility, listening, curiosity, compassion, these are going to help you. Arrogance will not. As it comes to actually finding that goal, you have to be curious about that and then actually bringing it to your team. You have to not have arrogance and ego as you do that. Okay, so first thing we did was towards a goal. That's part of influencing others towards the goal. So towards the goal we've covered. Influencing is the second part. What does it mean to be a change agent? I believe that leaders are fundamentally change agents inside of systems. We alter and change things. If everything is exactly the same 6 months after you arrived as it was when you first showed up as a leader, either everything was already perfect, and I've never seen perfection anywhere ever, or you're not doing a great job, because you should be changing things in 6 months to make stuff better. Now, I could edge case that, but let's just broadly say you're there to change things for the better. You're going to have an effect on where people are headed if you're doing your job. And you cannot lead if you can't drive those changes. And this is interesting because it doesn't matter how right you are. No matter how many proper things you analyze and assess and figure out, no matter how many of the problems of the organization you can point to and list out and tell other people, if you can't drive change around that, it doesn't matter. This was a huge lesson for me, because early on I was really good at observation and assessment. I still lean on those, but now it has to be through that lens of, okay, cool, here's what's observed, here's what I assess. I can't just leave that on the floor. I have to take that somewhere, and I have to take it to leaders, to other leaders and myself. I have to drive change there. I have to cause things to get better over time. That is what leaders do. So again, we started by knowing the goal. You now need to engage in this influencing piece. You give that goal meaning, and you make it something people will choose to move towards. And all of your varied skills are going to be put to work. Your soft skills, your hard skills, everything. And it's going to be focused on shifting the organization to maximize the chance of reaching the goal. That's what you're doing over and over and over. You do that not just for yourself, but you drive positive change. You also allow positive change to happen. You're watching other people, those underneath you, those around you, structurally in the organization, like in the hierarchy. You're watching them and you're allowing them to make positive changes too. So this is core thing leaders do. Influence others towards a goal. We're talking about influence here. Why do we fail to influence well in game dev? Okay, one of the big things I think when I've engaged with leaders, they don't even realize that influence is a core thing that's part of being a leader. That idea that you influence to create positive change that's a key thing that leaders do. They don't know that. They think, again, that conflict or that misunderstanding of management and leadership, they think they're there to manage things. They think they're there to just improve a system or make sure everything keeps running. No, you're there to drive positive change. But if you don't know that, you won't do it. And so you will just end up being a manager who doesn't actually make anything better or not meaningfully better over time. Second reason leaders fail to influence well in game dev. You never realized you were a leader at all. You didn't realize that because maybe you didn't have the title. Again, could be the confusion of management and leadership, but this is often somebody who's just more senior and has experience and people look up to. They don't realize the influence they have and how they could be using that for good. So they just kind of ignore that part. They keep doing good work on their own. I'm not saying that's wrong, but there's also this space that opens up when you realize, holy cow, I could have a positive impact on this organization. Let me go do that. And then another one, a big one, another reason people don't influence well in game dev. Influencing and changing things can be viewed as rocking the boat. And depending on your environment, that can be seen as a career limiter. And that can be because of politics, where people aren't going to like the fact that you're changing things and they're going to push back against you, and maybe they have more political power and maybe you'll get demoted or your influence will be hamstrung or you'll get punished in some way or fired or something bad will happen. So it can be like a political thing, or it could be just stress. Driving change is hard. It is stressful. It takes effort and time, and it doesn't always work, and it will always be harder than you wish it was, and that can be stressful. It can break you down, and leaders need to be up for that stress. If you can't handle that, then don't take a leadership role, because again, this is fundamental to what you do. You influence others towards the goal. You need to be able to drive change. I'm going to talk about a time for myself where I failed pretty badly at this, and this was in the early days when I was on the Summoner's Rift Update project. That was, over 10 years ago now. But when I first showed up to the environment art team that was doing that work, I did a lot to undercut my own influence. I was very new to game development, and I was very open about how little I knew. And I was constantly telling people, I don't really know what I'm doing, but blah, blah, blah. And then I'd have a suggestion. They'd all ignore it because I was constantly telling them I didn't know what I was doing. What I actually discovered, I was pretty good at identifying the problems that were in the leadership and production space, because even though there were a lot of people who had a lot more game dev experience than me on that team, most of them didn't view it through a production lens, and the production lens is a unique craft that I was practicing, getting better at, studying, getting mentored around, and trying to figure out how to do the best within. So I was really great actually at identifying some problems. Not perfect. It's still very early in my career. I'm not perfect at it now. But I wouldn't resolve any of them. And part of that was because nobody trusted me to actually drive change, because I'd spent the last 6 months telling them I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of acted as though I was an observer of the system without any real responsibility for improving it, rather than an actual part of it that could drive change from within. So while I was great at seeing the system, understanding it, I didn't improve it. I was terrible at improving it. And I acted like my job stopped at that. I could just tell everybody, like, look, here's all the problems. And then they were supposed to just know what to do with that. My actual job as a producer on that team was to fix and improve things, to increase our chances of succeeding, to improve our effectiveness so we could succeed more rapidly, all these things. By the way, I want to note here, I talked about humility earlier. I was not being humble when I was doing that, like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing and all that self-deprecation. I was just being self-deprecating and probably suffering from low self-esteem. That's not humility. My ego was very much involved. I was worried that people would expect more of me than I could provide, and I was actually very concerned about my reputation. I was focused on myself, even as I was beating myself up and undermining my own authority. So how do we start influencing? Maybe you're in a situation where you've realized you can see the problems, right? You know the goal. You can see the problems that are in the way of getting there, but you haven't really started influencing the organization. First thing here, avoid cynicism. You have to be able to avoid the cynicism and the bitterness that can pop up because changing things is hard. You get blocked by random people and systems and things, and it can just feel like you have no power, no authority, no ability to actually drive any change. And many people sort of retreat into that, and they just go like, there's nothing I can do. This system is busted. This organization's stupid. Blah, blah, blah. It's all never going to work, but what can I do? There's nothing I can do. I'm going to tell you something. I think it's true. You can change more than you know. But the bitterness and the cynicism won't help you do that. You can change more than you know. It may not be everything, and it may not be all at once. But what I want you to do is focus on what you can change. So maybe you see problems, you're in a studio that has 10 teams in it, and they're all in different spaces, 2 groups of 5 teams, and you're on one of those teams. Well, you see studio level problems, you might not have the influence to change that yet. But maybe on your own team, you can make things better. And maybe if you make things better on your own team, you can ladder that up to that group of 5 teams that you're a part of. Maybe you can talk to those leaders about how you think things could be improved, even if it's just for your team. You have the ability to start influencing. Just because you can't get the whole company pointed in a new direction in a short space of time doesn't mean you are powerless. Focus on what you can change. Second thing, in how to start influencing, build your relationships with others. So first, we avoid the cynicism and the bitterness. Second, we build your relationships with others. These could be small groups of peers. I recommend starting there, actually. Talk to the leaders right around you, the other producers. If you're a producer, if you're an art lead, talk to the art leads. If you're an engineer, like an engineering lead or a senior engineer, talk to the tech leads and the engineering managers. Talk with your peers first. Start building a relationship with them. And I don't mean you want to become best buds with everybody. That's not the point here. But you want to develop effective working relationships where there's mutual trust, that we are collectively trying to get to a goal, and I have the interests of everybody in mind as I try to get there. And if you come through as genuine in that, hopefully because you are genuine in that, you will start developing relationships with people. You'll also discover ways that you can help them and they can help you, and you'll find that surprising and strange, but then you'll do it, and then that'll build the trust and strengthen the relationship. It's much more impactful when a group of people come to a senior leader and say, hey, we think this thing is busted and we have an idea to fix it, than when one person does. And if you've built relationships, you're more likely to be able to recruit others to help out. After you've gone to a small group of peers around you, start talking to key leaders. Who's your boss? Who are the stakeholders, directors, managers? Engage with them. Leadership isn't all about those underneath you structurally. They're not just about those you lead. They are also, like when I talk about influencing others towards a goal, others means everybody. You lead those above, you lead those below in the structure. And so you need to start developing relationships, because without relationships, they are less likely to trust you and follow your ideas. We all like to think that if we're right and we have the best arguments, that'll get everything through. It won't. But if you have a good relationship with somebody, sometimes even if you don't have a great argument, they'll listen to you. Even if you're just going off your gut, they'll listen to you because they trust you. Now, some people see this and they go, oh, you're manipulating people. You're playing politics. You know, I'm not going to deny the charge. Some of this is political. Some of this is, yes, I'm developing relationships so that I can be more effective at helping the team go where it's trying to go. And, sure, that can be misguided and that can go south. But the alternative is to just not do that, to not engage with this, because I don't ever want to be accused of manipulating anybody or being in politics. Influencing people and manipulating people are not the same thing. When you're manipulating people, you're trying to selfishly get something you want. When you're influencing people, there's a goal you're trying to reach that you think is a good goal for everybody, and you want to help them get there. You might be wrong, and sometimes you will be. But just because you're trying to influence people doesn't mean you're some political animal that needs to be rooted out of the organization. Don't take us, if you're one of those people that just says, I never want to get involved in politics, I would say the same thing as I said earlier, then don't become a leader. Leaders have to engage to some extent in politics. So start building those relationships, peers, managers, leaders, stakeholders. It's going to help you influence. Third thing, develop courage. So we avoid cynicism and bitterness. We build the relationships. And then we develop courage. Leaders will need courage to confront the anti-patterns that exist around them, to call out the things that are broken, to say, like, this isn't working right, I think we could do better. You have to be willing to say that out loud, and that's going to be saying the wrong thing to some people. And you have to look past that and still go do it anyway for the higher chance of reaching the goal for the whole organization. You have to put yourself in the back seat a little bit. If you're all about self-preservation, leadership's not a good role for you. Because I'm going to be honest with you, when you go and develop courage and start pointing out the problems and start trying to influence positive change, a lot of people might get behind you and be really excited and think that that's great. Some people might think that that's really bad, as you undermine the system that they're used to operating in. And it can be dangerous in some orgs. But just because it's dangerous doesn't mean you get a pass. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Now, I'm also not saying go die on every hill and stubbornly, walk up to the CEO and tell him why he's an idiot and how he should change things. Diplomacy matters here. Courage and diplomacy will go together very well. If you can learn how to, and again, people are like, this is all politics. Yes, welcome to leadership. You are influencing other people towards the goal. This is what you do. And if you're not comfortable with this, you should not be a leader. But you want to do this. You want to do this with a strong moral frame. You don't want to become, Machiavellian in this. But you are trying to help. You're trying to help your team. You're trying to make a great game that players love. You're trying to help that CEO that you could go to and talk to and say, like, hey, this is what I think could improve things. A lot of this is like learning good framing. Like, a lot of diplomacy is learning good framing and how to talk about these things. You need to develop those skills because they're going to help you as you grow as a leader. I was early on in my career someone who hated all of this. I was like, no, I hate politics and never want to get involved. But it limited how much I was able to support my team, how much I was able to help make a great game that players would love, how much I was able to help the organization improve. And what I discovered over time is that you can be part of you can't not be part of politics. And two, since you're going to be a part of it, whether you want it or not, you might as well figure out how to get proficient at operating in that system for the good of everybody. And I'm not saying there's not danger here of going down a Machiavellian Machiavellian road, which is a road where you use people to your own ends. But I think running in the other direction, you just end up in another ditch. You just end up in the opposite ditch with an inability to drive influence. So yes, it's dangerous. Courage is going to help. Diplomacy is going to help. Combine those things. You might be surprised at how much influence you can drive, especially if you've managed to avoid the bitterness and the cynicism and you've built healthy relationships. Okay, influencing others towards a goal. We've talked about towards a goal. We've talked about influencing. The last thing is others. I've obviously already alluded to this. I do not believe in this idea of like you lead yourself or something like that. I mean, there's like aspects where that analogy kind of works, but leaders to me fundamentally have followers, and they aren't necessarily just the people on your team that you're a leader of. They are, like I said before, all the people around you. They're your peers, they're your stakeholders, they're your team. If no one is following you, you aren't leading. You can still go do great things. You can still follow you and go do some stuff as an individual contributor, and that can have a positive impact. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're leading, others are following. And if no one's following, that means you're not actually leading. And in non-coercive environments, which hopefully game dev is more of than not, trust is the foundation by which you will gain followers. People follow leaders they trust. If they don't trust you, they'll give lip service to whatever you can command through authority and position. But that's all you'll get. You'll get lip service. You'll get compliance and not support. Okay, so why does no one really follow you in game dev? First thing I see a lot. Well, it's because I got this role and title. They have to follow me. And as I was just saying, there's truth in that to some extent, but it's superficial. You will get the begrudging compliance. You need support. And you will not get support if you just try to throw around your title or role and say, this is what we're going to do because I'm in charge. It's not going to go well for you long term. I'm not saying, there's no time to be decisive, but man, if people trust you, when you're then you have the opportunity to be decisive, and they'll go like, look, we trust him. Like, this is a tough one, but we can get behind him. We'll follow him or her wherever they're leading. You need to be thinking about the order in which you do things. The role and the title, yes, gives you authority. But leadership will come through the trust, and when it comes to actually having followers that support you. Second reason why no one really follows you in game dev. You thought the role was all about the processes, the systems, and the reports. You didn't realize it was primarily about people. If you're in a leadership role, it is about people. This is a very understandable mistake, by the way. People get obsessed with the processes and the systems and the reports. Too much of our industry seems to prioritize the former over the latter. They tend to focus heavily and incentivize people just taking care of like Favreau or Jira or the work system and the blah, 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 and not really thinking about the people very much. But leaders have others behind them, and others are people, not systems. Third thing, kind of a weird one, you never ask people to follow you. So one of the reasons why no one really follows you in game dev, you never ask them to. Maybe because of insecurity, your own overwork, that gets the better of you. You went solo instead of asking for help. And perhaps people would have been very willing to support you, but you just tried to do it alone. And if you just said like, hey, I'm trying to do this really hard thing, can anybody help me? People around you, peers, people on your team might have been like, oh, I can help you do that. And you might be shocked at how much support you might get, especially if they can see how that relates to getting to a goal and they trust you. Another one, though, is subtly different. You might have asked, but they might not have realized you asked. You failed to communicate well with them. A huge part of a leader's job is communicating. It's a core part of this whole influencing thing. If you're doing it badly or not doing it at all, you're not going to have anybody following you. So you need to be good. You need to figure out if you're communicating well, and then you need to be willing to ask, and now you might actually have people following you. If you did not build trust with people, I've covered this already a couple times, or were not trustworthy in their eyes, they're not going to follow you. They will only follow you as far as fear takes them. And especially if you've broken trust with them, you're going to have even more of a challenge. I want to talk about two stories of myself in this space of others and bringing others along when I was trying to go to a better place. So I've been on the champion team on League of Legends and Riot Games a couple of times in my career, in 2012 and again in 2015. In 2012, I did this massive exercise of building a work system. I'm not kidding. I woke up at 3 a.m. one day and I was like, I think I can make this better. And then I wrote down a bunch of stuff and I started implementing it. And it was so perfect in theory. In practice, it was terrible. And a lot of people there tried to tell me that. And was like, no, but it's going to work great. And I didn't know what I was doing. I say that because it's genuinely true. Not because I want to undercut my own authority here. But even once I rolled it out, those people who were saying it wasn't going to work, they complied because I had the authority and position to make the change. And they respected that enough to follow. But the system was awful. And I don't even think they gave me lip service. I think they really tried. They tried to support me in it because they were really great people. And I just the system just pummeled them. Anyway, soon after, I don't know if it was related to this or not, didn't seem to be, but I wouldn't be shocked. I was moved off that team onto a different team. And they reverted all the changes almost right away. They were just like, okay, this system is really bad. A great example, by the way, of when you're leading but not actually driving change is if you are the link, the only thing, the single point of failure where if you go, so does the change. That means you're not finding a way to permanently, positively influence the org. I went away. I got a few years of experience under my belt. I learned a lot. I realized all the mistakes I'd made in that thing, or some of them at least. Still learning about them actually as I go. But in 2015, went back to that same team. It changed a lot. And similarly, they had some issues in their work system. I changed that work system, and this time I'm pretty confident it was for the better. I think I knew a lot more about it. It actually was improving it quite a bit. But I never brought anyone along with me. And I had this great conversation with a designer named Jordan, really cool guy. And he basically pulled me aside one time. He's like, Ben, I see you trying to drive all this change. I'm paraphrasing all this, but he told me he wanted to trust me. But I never explained why I was doing anything and where I was going. And it made it really hard to support me because he was viewed as an influential leader, informal or not, inside of that team. And I realized I hadn't brought anybody along. I was just making changes and then telling everybody what they had to do. I wasn't explaining to them why, and I wasn't giving them the meaningful reasons behind the things I was changing. I did adjust this after the conversation. I think it took me some time, but I adjusted this, and it probably was pretty bumpy at first. The interesting thing is the changes I made did become a better way for the team to work, and they continued using that way of working even after I had gone. So that was really cool to see. That was an example of, again, I did have a positive influence, but I was getting in my way partially because I just wasn't asking. Okay, I want to talk about servant leadership, how you gain real followers. When people think of servant leader, they often think of a purely supportive person, just a leader who asks the team what they want and provides, tries to do that for them and is a coach and is guiding and supporting and encouraging from behind while the team goes and does the hard thing. I think this is a misapprehension of what a servant leader is. It's a misunderstood phrase. And I'm going to give a military analogy for this. I had some time in the military, so you'll have to apologize. I apologize for all the military analogies. If I was an officer and I'm leading my combat unit and we're walking through the woods or something, and we start taking fire. Everybody in the Army would know, you start taking fire, you get down. It makes you harder to hit, and it's a good response when you don't know what else to do. We start taking fire, let's get down. If you think you know where the fire is coming from, you start returning fire. But one of the things that the leaders of that space, and it could be anybody, but especially that officer, might be thinking is this is a really bad spot to be taking fire. They've got us in a kill zone. What you are supposed to do then is stand up and tell your unit, we got to move. And you might say, come with me. You might say, go. You might say, move east. You might say, charge the enemy. There's a lot of different things you might do. But you need to get your unit out of that dangerous spot that they're in because you know that staying there is bad. This, to me, is a great example of a servant leader. And a lot of people are like, wait a minute. No. That's the guy who stands up and says, go that way. How is that a servant leader? Because that person is serving their unit. They're serving the mission. They're serving everyone. They're serving themselves last. That is what a servant leader does. They serve through leadership. It's not serving instead of leading. It's serving through leading. They have a rank and and an authority and ideally a respect and a trust from the people that are following them, that allows them to serve through leading. So be careful when you hear the term servant leadership if people say like, well, he's not really being a servant leader or she's not really doing a good job of servant leadership. Make sure that they aren't just thinking you should just be supporting. You still need to be leading. And when you do that, you connect the goal, the team, and yourself while taking care of yourself last. If you do this, if you actually go to work as a leader, formal or informal, and you do this every day, you constantly, there's times to do the coaching thing, there's times to do the supporting thing and the asking what you can do thing. All that's great. But you're also willing to make calls and be decisive in the interests of the people that you serve through leadership. You will become somebody that people trust. They will follow you. Last thing I'll talk about for gaining real followers, care. You have to care. You care about the goal, for sure. You care about the people you lead, for sure. And you care about those things, as in the servant leadership example, more than you care about yourself. If you act that out every day, and you can use your word care, compassion, love, kindness, whatever it is. If you model that and you engage with your teams with that approach, they will follow you. You will have people who have your back as you go in a direction. And by the way, when I say you care more about them than you care about yourself, I don't mean you burn yourself out or don't take care of yourself at all. A burned out, fried, exhausted you is not useful to the team. It's not going to help them reach their goals. So you do have to take care of yourself, but the point of taking care of yourself in that work context is so that you can take care of them. That, again, is both you demonstrating care and you being a good servant leader. Combine that with the things we talked about earlier, the humility, the diplomacy, the courage. You'll be amazed at the positive changes you can make. So leading well. The leader's role is not, although you will do this stuff, your job as a leader is not to file reports or facilitate meetings or to plan things or to talk to senior people or to hire, fire, promote, or be confident and have the answers. You're going to do those things. They aren't the point. You do those things to support what matters. And those things are things like identifying the goals, validating the goals, changing things, sometimes dramatically and potentially even dangerously for you to reach that goal. You need to care about the team. You need to care about the player and the game. You need to be curious and open-minded. You need to learn whatever skills you need, and then you need to adapt to whatever your environment is as a leader, because you're going to be changing a lot. Every team you're going to be on needs a slightly different leader, and you need to be able to become that leader to some degree. You'll always be you, but you're going to adapt wherever you go. And I'm going to talk about those last two real quick, the learning the skills you need and adapting to whatever your new environment is. These are a big deal. Leaders are not something, again, where you just can go through, read a book, and be like, now I know how to lead. You need to be learning all the time. You need to be learning about the different disciplines you're leading. You need to be learning about the game you're trying to make, the organization, the cultural goals, the way the process works and who's changing it and how that works for you and what you need to push back on and what you don't. Leadership is a constantly learning role. If you're not up for that, don't be a leader. Once you're good at learning, it's going to make you able to adapt to whatever your environment is. So 3 key values: humility, courage, and care that I talked about. So what do you actually do, right? I've talked about this thing, leading well in game development. The problem is I don't have, here's the 5 steps for you, and I don't think anybody does. You do everything and you do nothing. You're going to do whatever needs to be done to transform the organization into a place that moves towards their vision and objectives. You do those things while caring about your team, the players, and the studio. You're going to avoid all the distractions that are going to take your time off that path, because your job is to bring everybody else to a place where they're succeeding. There will be a million distractions that will come up. You need to stay away from them. They will always be there. Okay. A final story, a little bit more of a positive one than some of the others. I realized one time when I was actually on the SRU team where I'd started off very badly by undercutting my own authority. It ended well, and we shipped a great product. But one of the things that was fascinating is by the time I got to the end of that product, I was no longer as necessary for the day-to-day. I'd done enough to lead well, to establish a healthy culture. And it wasn't just me. There were leaders around me, and that team was amazing. But I'd done enough to lead well, to bring up other leaders, that when we got to the end, it was so interesting. I didn't have that much that I was actually doing. And when you're thinking about a major release, it's weird that, the development manager, like the lead operational producer on that project, I wasn't going crazy, tearing my hair out, running around, because my team had it. the leaders around me had it. I remember as we were coming up to that, to release, it was a few days before release, and we had a big blocker bug show up, and our lead QA, awesome guy named Joe, he pinged me. He said, "Hey, we got a blocker bug," and I didn't go like, "Okay, what blah blah blah, this is what we got to do." Blah. I just asked him like, "What do you need from me?" And he said, "Nothing, just letting you know." And it was so powerful for me in that moment to realize, holy cow, we're days away from this huge release that we've been working on for years. And we have a blocker bug come up, and my lead QA feels fully confident that he can handle it on his own. He doesn't need me. And he did. He went and he talked to the engineers. They got it resolved. They got it figured out. I think I said something to him like, "Cool, like, let me know if you need me, right? I'm here. I'm here to help. I'm here if you need my positional authority, if you need my advice or expertise, I'm here." But he handled it. That didn't happen overnight. It took a long time. And again, I was surrounded by amazing people. But it was a great example for me. It was power. Like I said, it was powerful for me in that moment to realize, holy cow, this is possible. Like, you can lead well, and you can create a better organization that can solve problems on their own. That doesn't rely on me to fix everything, because I don't know everything and I can't fix everything, but the team can. And I built a resilient team. Again, with the leaders around me. I hope that doesn't sound like I'm taking all the credit for that, because gosh, I worked with some amazing people on that project. Okay. Real quick then, practically, steps to leading well. First, do you know your goal? If no, find it. Find your goal. If you do know the goal, or if you had to go find it, now you know it, are you able to influence the org? If no, develop the relationships, the courage, and the skills to do so. Start small if you have to. Change what you can. Let's say you know the goal and you can influence the org. Are people following you? If no, find out why. Build trust. Serve through leadership. Connect people to the goal. Demonstrate that you care. And people will start trusting you. And if you know the goal, you're influencing the org and people are following, congratulations. You are leading and can positively impact your game and your team. Real quick wrap up of this. Leadership is influencing others towards a goal. Know the goal. Learn how to influence and make sure you're being followed. Not by demanding they follow you, but by being somebody worthy of being followed. Everything else is a distraction. Stay humble, be courageous, and actively care. All right, that wraps it up. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you listening.